Question is, where will it end? And also what Kim Jong Un will get from the Russians in return from his shells and missiles. There's a lot of nervous speculation that it might go a bit beyond the help we think he's been getting with his satellite launching rockets, that he may ask Putin for example, help in mounting ballistic missiles in submarines. If he could do that, if Kim Jong Un could fire his nuclear warheads from a submarine, that would really be a big change in the strategic balance and a big headache for South Korea and the United States and all their allies.
The world doesn't stop while the UK has its general election, of course. Vladimir Putin is in North Korea today. It's the Russian president's first visit to Pyongyang since 2000, and he arrived to a literal red carpet. Richard Lloyd Parry is Asia editor for The Times. Morning to you, Richard.
Hello there, Stig.
What's he doing this for? First time in 24 years. Why would he do this?
Well, his relationship with Kim Jong Un and with North Korea has become more and more important since the invasion of Ukraine. Vladimir Putin doesn't have all that many friends left in the world. He certainly lost a lot. And last September, Kim Jong Un went to Russia. He met Putin at a cosmodrome in Siberia, where they hung out and had talks. And at the time, it seemed slightly pathetic, even that Putin was reduced to turning to the North Koreans for friendship. But now, a few months later, people are taking it a lot more seriously. For one thing, North Korean manufactured shells have turned up in sort of smoking fragments in cities in Ukraine. So we know that Kim really is sending munitions which are being fired into Ukraine, day by day. So that's, looking more and more important for Putin as he fights this increasingly protracted war in Ukraine. But also, people are beginning to wonder now that they're just having their talks now, but the article that Putin wrote in the North Korean media and briefings by his aides has talked about deepening the friendship and even forming some kind of treaty. So the question is, where will it end? And also what Kim Jong Un will get from the Russians in return from his shells and missiles. There's a lot of nervous speculation that it might go a bit beyond the help we think he's been getting with his satellite launching rockets, that he may ask Putin for example, help in mounting ballistic missiles in submarines. If he could do that, if Kim Jong Un could fire his nuclear warheads from a submarine, that would really be a big change in the strategic balance and a big headache for South Korea and the United States and all their allies.
And where's China in all of this? Because China do support North Korea, don't they? So did they want this to happen? Is this an axis that goes through North Korea, Russia, China, North Korea together? What's their public stance on it?
Yeah, I mean, there are big changes and shifts taking place in East Asia, which are becoming more obvious month by month and year by year. And it feels more and more like a return to a kind of Cold War arrangement where two blocks are forming up. On the one side, you have the US and its allies, its NATO allies, and also Asian allies, South Korea, Japan, Australia. On the other, you have coalescing this other bloc. It's no longer a kind of communist bloc because Russia's not communist and China isn't really. But it includes China, Russia, North Korea, maybe Iran. They are coming closer together. They're helping one another out. I don't think China will mind that Russia and North Korea are getting close. There was a time when China and Russia competed in a way for North Korean friendship. The North Korean rulers before Kim Jong Un used to play them off against one another rather skillfully. But they're more and more now uniting around a common agenda, which is opposition to the US and its allies. And there's a lot of lengthy commentary in the North Korean media today about opposing what they call a unipolar world, which means a world dominated by the United States, and building a multipolar world, which means a world in which you have more than one superpower. And this is the kind of theory that is behind all this.
What's striking about that list, though, Richard, is only one of those countries is actually a superpower or even a power, really. China is obviously hugely powerful and increasingly powerful economic state. But North Korea is a failed state. Iran is a theocracy which has been had sanctions for years and years. It's kind of a failed state. Um, Russia is a small economy considering its size. Uh, Taken together, do they become more threatening than their parts? Is that the argument, I suppose?
They're very threatening because they have nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Iran, maybe, the other three, definitely. I'm not sure it's right to call North Korea a failed state.
Really?
We thought it was going to be a failed state in the 1990s. Everyone had written it off, but it has survived. It's not a very nice place to live and to be a North Korean, but the state is still very strong. No one imagined that someone like Kim Jong Un could have survived for this long, and they are, a nuclear armed axis. That in itself gives them power and importance, and in some ways the economics is secondary.
And we also have with Putin, he has cordial relations with India. He's going to visit Vietnam next. You can broaden this out, couldn't you, to a whole bunch of countries that aren't as opposed to Russia as people might think who don't consider it very much.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to the kind of Cold War theme. There aren't many countries in the world, governments in the world, I think, that believe that the invasion of Ukraine was a brilliant idea. I think that includes China and India. But that's not the same as coming out and opposing it. I mean, what you find when you talk to a lot of people from the kind of smaller and middling countries is that they're desperate not to be forced to have to choose a side,
Yeah.
which of course is what happened during the first Cold War in the second half of the 20th century. There were two teams, and you had to pick a team, and people were rewarded because they picked a team, not because they were, laudable governments or democracies. I mean, there were all kinds of horrible pro-US, pro-Western Cold War dictatorships, which you remember. And that's the thing that's happening now. So, I mean, India doesn't necessarily, I think, support what Putin's doing or what he stands for, but they don't want have to be put in a position where they have to pick a side because they see advantages, strategic advantages, self-interest in keeping the two sides balanced against one another so they can pick and choose their alliances and allegiances.
And then you throw in China's influence in other parts of the world, like Africa, and all of a sudden there's a coalition of sorts that is very significant, isn't it?
It's hugely significant. It's a great big turning point, really, in the way the world is set up. You can feel the gears grinding, beneath all this, beneath the sort of, in some ways, rather superficially comic theatrics of the bear hugs of Kim Jong Un and Putin at the airport.
I think that's such a good point. It's easy to, because there is something intrinsically funny about Kim Jong Un and Putin. You can underestimate them probably quite easily. Richard, really interesting stuff. Thank you for joining us. That's Richard Lloyd Parry, the Asia editor for The Times. There's always been something essentially funny about dictators as well as scary. But there's something of the ridiculous, but you can't ignore the threat beneath it.